everybody. Today we are back with Ellias Lonsdale. You want to say hey?
Hey.
And we are going to be talking about life after death. I'm actually really excited about this because this is something that I haven't really gone into on this channel. So I think this will be a cool thing to dive into. And I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Okay. When I was first becoming a real astrologer, which was in the early to mid 1980s, the same period that I got into the Chandra symbols that we talked about previous session, with a woman who is my spirit twin. And you can use whatever term like. We just had a really, really strong connection. And we were best friends for 5 years. Then we were together for over 10 years. And at the end of that time, she died from breast cancer. And when she was in the dying process, she awakened in a very major way. And her whole life had been leading up to this. She had always been aware that she would die young. There were a lot of things involved. And so it wasn't like that big a shock that she was going through this. But she basically was ready for a greater journey in dying than just the usual. And she'd read everything you want to think about what happens to people after death. And she's completely into it. Okay. I was completely into it also. And we were tuning into greater sources. And a whole bunch of stuff was happening in our lives that was about as powerful as could possibly be spiritually. So by the last 6 weeks of her life, we were living in a place called Bonnie Doon, which is outside of Santa Cruz, California. And we had been in that community for quite a while. And so we had a lot of friends. And I put out a call on the local radio thing. And so all these people came and helped us and were involved in everything. It was a big community event for basically about 6 weeks, about 5 to 6 weeks. And Sarah became very, very extroverted and playful and joyous, not the usual. I mean, just, she went into the hospital for a couple of days toward the end, and she was the most popular person with the nurses and everybody. And she was just zinging along with her Leo rising. And so by the time she was ready to die, she was in a very high space and a very expanded space. And I was with her in it. And so the moment that she died, which we call this the triple death, she died, but she died right into her real and true self, rather than having to go through a whole extended phase of whatever, as some people do. She literally became instantly who she really is. And I know because I was there with her, I could track it. I have these abilities to do these things when I need to. So I was with her going across the threshold into the light and all of it. And what happened was that she basically said to me, well, I'm going to join you. I'm not just going onward. I'm going to join you. I'm going to really be fully with you. And 13 days after she died, she came to visit me. She told me she was going to visit me. And she did. And then she said, I'm staying. And what she meant was that she would come into the left side of my body and she would be integrally a part of my life, which she has been ever since. Sarah has many names. We've written books about this. Okay. The biggest thing to say about this is that we were both very involved with astrology. And to us, death was part of the star journey. It wasn't something separate. And we weren't seeing the night sky as dark. In fact, I do not believe, and there are people talking about this these days, I do not believe there is dark matter. I do not even think that there are, what do you call it, black holes in the way we're thinking. We're obsessed with the dark side of the heavens, and actually, they're not very dark. Um, there's a tremendous light in everything. There's starlight in everything. And so when we don't die into a dark world as we've traditionally projected in our fear. We die into light, which all the near-death experiences have described. I'm sure you're aware of that whole thing. And so essentially, the light of the stars lights up during after death, and there's many ways that this happens. And so to me, because I had been already for 23 years, 20, almost 24 years involved with the stars when Sarah died in 1993, it was just part of this whole other thing. So I'm trying to bring these together because I feel that essentially we need a new astrology where we honor the death journey, because many of us will either die soon because everybody's dying off. There's this phenomenon going on, and I don't want to give it any energy, but there's a lot going on with that. Or we may well discover how to die in a different way, how to die and be reborn. Essentially, none of us are going to get out of here alive. We're all going to be propelled to deal with death. And I know that when we're very young, and it was true of me too, we don't really deal with it that much. But by the time you're anywhere into your 30s and 40s, it depends. Each person's different. I think that starts to change more and more. And by the time you're 50, 60, 70, not just because you might die soon, but because death is a presence, is a force in your life. It's an amazing thing. So I've discovered that the life after death and the life that we're living here are two very strong parts of each other, and that we don't actually have another world that we kind of go off into after we die, and it's just kind of something else beyond. It's actually more and more an integral part of this life. And I don't only, I communicate with Sarah, who now calls herself Haven Song. She is one of my sources, but we had other friends who died and who are also part of my, so I'm tuning into people who've died a lot, including both my parents. Um, and I was there with their deaths and everything. And so it's this whole thing for me. It all started with births, but then it really became deaths. And I haven't been present at a lot of deaths, but I'm very involved with people. Like when somebody dies, sometimes I track with them, or they track with me, or they come in my dreams. It's just an integral part of my life. Okay, so what I would like to present is that we need to begin to fathom these mysteries and not to put them off to say, well, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Nobody really knows what happens, and all these ways that the mind likes to talk. I don't think any of that's true. I don't think you can ever put it off till, because when like in the Buddhist belief, basically you better be preparing for your death all the time. Yeah. What the Dalai Lama does every single night from 3 o'clock, 3 a.m. onward when he gets up, is he practices dying, not because he's paranoid, obsessed with his own death, but because that's the practice that enables him, when he dies, to take the greatest journey that he can take. And that's just part of Buddhism. Yeah. And it's not only Buddhism. So we this is the area. What do you feel when I bring all this up?
Well, I have a question. When you say, I have questions, but when you say that they kind of exist within where we are,
Yes,
do you mean like in another dimension, but on planet, or is that, I guess I'm trying
yes,
to, okay,
yes.
yes, I've always kind of figured that too. Just that, do you think it is a, do you think it is a higher dimension always, or do you think sometimes it is a lower do you know what I'm
Well,
trying to ask?
people who get stuck at the death place because they didn't believe in anything after death, and they are not ready to journey. Sometimes people get stuck at the door and don't really move onward and don't really embrace the life after death and all of its dimensions. And they exist in a fairly dark realm.
Okay.
Um, and there's every possible variation. There's every possible, everybody has their own death and their own journey.
So okay. So those that don't kind of believe that anything happens after they pass might get stuck in that doorway. Uh,
Or, or if somebody has some heavy karma to work out where they, for example, had difficult deaths before and they panic in dying and they refuse to go on because they have all these ideas about what might happen. It's that kind of stuff happens a lot.
yeah, I could totally see how that could. What about okay? What about the manner in the way that somebody dies? Does that play a role at all?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, you could say who we are in the moment we die is very instrumental because dying is a very here and now experience, actually.
Yeah.
Um, it's not a general timeless stretch, right?
It's in
Just
that
like birth, just like birth is a very here and now experience, right? It's like right there. Well, death is, if anything, even more so, at least if you're ready for it. It's like the ultimate satori, the ultimate awakening moment, or at least it can be. And so it essentially, it's the greatest moment of truth in the world. It tells you where you're at. And so those of us who want to really be part of the greater reality need to be prepared to die, not so much in a morbid sense, but because that dimension is actually, the older you get, that dimension is a deeper and truer part of you.
yeah.
I'm 75 now. And at this point, I mean, I have a long lived family and I expect to live a long time. But for the next 25 years or whatever, I expect that death will be closer and closer to me, not in a way that scares me or freaks me out or makes me strange, but in a way that helps me to be deep and true and wise and wakeful and helpful to others and celebrational of this world.
I think that's a good way to look at it, and a good way to I think it is. I think it is. And I get what you mean about it not being like a morbid thing, but just
Yeah, because death is not strange.
no, it happens to everybody. So there's really
There's,
nothing. Yeah.
there's a Canadian folk singer, Bruce Coburn, and he sings, "Death's no stranger, it's no stranger than the life I've seen. Death's no stranger, it's no stranger than the life I've seen." It's not a stranger.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
And of course, we've died many times if you want to, you know,
Yeah.
go into them.
Yeah.
In fact, it's the most familiar thing in the world. It's just that we have built walls against it.
About that, about coming back, right? And like previous lifetimes and things like that. Because a lot of the work that I really, really enjoy doing does kind of, I fuck with that. And then, you know, what you wanted to kind of learn this time around and what have you. You're talking about people or spirits, you know, being in another dimension here, essentially.
Yes.
When are they called back? Or are they called back to this dimension? Or do they have a choice? Or do they just, do you know what I'm trying to, I don't know if I'm asking what I'm asking correctly.
Yes. They definitely can be called back. Most people are. And it's part of the cycle, really. And then sometimes you go through a death that's so powerful and so ultimate that it leads you in a slightly different direction. Like you basically become at one with the cosmos, and then you can become at one with the earth as well, which is a whole subject in itself. And basically, you don't need to reincarnate, or if you do, it's going to be later after a while. I realized the problem with talking like this is it's so individual. I mean, everybody's death is like a whole universe of their own.
Yeah. I think I'm really interested in what you're saying. I think other people will be too. Let me ask you something. When you talk about a especially powerful death, what would that look like? What do you think that would look like?
Well, sometimes, let's just say that in your last lifetime before this one, you died in a really powerful way of one kind or another. And then you come to a similar point at this time. You're ready in your deepest being to tap the full power of death for an ultimate journey. And it means that you would be extremely alert, like with Sarah. She was extremely alert, like she was more alert than anybody else around her. Um, and you become just deeply present to yourself, and you embrace. Well, see, here's a dimension we're not mentioning so far.
Okay.
When you die, you're surrounded by angels, and you're also surrounded by people who you've known who have died, sometimes, and sometimes you're even surrounded by other beings, and so you know you're in this whole realm, and so in a way, um, how do I explain? The power is that this is an event beyond you. This is happening deeper and fuller than you. This is, you know, and great people who've died, this has happened where, you know, people have reported how, let's say, being present in the room of somebody of an extraordinary kind who dies, the whole family, the whole community, the whole world, just things shift. And the beings that are around, the angels and everybody, they're sort of amplifying the signal and bringing this whole world into being.
So like, okay, I know recently I did a video about with somebody about John Lennon's death.
About what?
John Lennon's death.
Yes.
And I also got some emails about like that one being like particularly striking a chord with them, say. Would that be kind of an example of things kind of shifting, or do you know what I'm trying to, sometimes I feel like I don't ask things correctly. Does that kind of make sense? Like, would that be an example of that kind of?
Yeah, when someone dies like that, where whether it's by violence or by some other extraordinary means, everybody feels it. Everybody's part of it. John Lennon, whew, that was something. Um, he represented so much more than just being a Beatle.
Yeah.
And he's gone on ever since. Princess Diana is another example.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson is another example. Or people who were assassinated like in the 60s, Martin Luther King and the Kennedy brothers and Malcolm X, and just so many people like that. But also, it's not always death by violence. It can be that somebody is so full on by the time they die that when they die, it's like the whole world opens up a little.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, it doesn't always have to be a violent death for that kind of. I'm gonna say something. I do feel like in a past life I was assassinated. I don't know. I not necessarily don't necessarily think I was on the caliber of being known as what you're, what we're talking. But yes, always kind of figured that was the case. Um, how did Sarah know that she was gonna die young?
Well, there's 3 levels to it. One, she had really major physical problems all her life, including such a serious case of asthma as a child that she almost died from it.
Oh God.
Asthma at its worst is very, very extreme. And she had extreme problems with her eyes and other things. And she just knew that she wasn't going to last. She was frail. She was fragile. She was small. She was thin. She was, but okay, there's that level. Another level is that she grew up mostly in a religion that most people don't really know much about, but it's not uncommon, which is the Baha'i faith. Um, Baha'is. She had a lot of relatives who were Baha'is, and she really related to it. And they are a religion of prophecy. Their whole thing is prophecy. And so she lived into prophecy about the collective situation, but also herself. And then, most of all, starting in 1986, so this was like, what, 7.5 years before she died. What had happened briefly, it's worth telling. Yeah, I should tell that story. My first death that really meant anything was when I was, that 38 years old, 38 years old. And my father died. And I was called back east to Princeton, New Jersey, where he was, well, he wasn't dying yet, but he started to as soon as I got there, basically. And I was very involved with helping him with his death. My father, my mother, and my sister, the only others present, involved, all had no belief in anything on that level. And I knew. So I helped him with it. And then for the next few months, I was deeply involved with him. And I would dream these incredible dreams about what he was going through. And then on spring equinox the next year, this was in December that he died. Everybody I know always dies in December. On spring equinox, I spent an hour with him. He came to me for an hour and spoke to me of everything he was going through. And it was just overwhelmingly powerful. It was at a key nature spot. And that night, I started to tune in with greater sources. It opened up the threshold for me. And so that meant that then for 7.5 years before Sarah died, I was tuning in all the time and she was writing down what I would say. And she was totally into it. And the key theme, more and more and more, was about her death. Not because everybody was obsessed with how frail she was, not exactly on that level, but we saw the guiding forces really made it clear that she was meant to help with death for everybody. And so that just confirmed for her everything. And we had many wild cosmic experiences with this. So essentially, she just couldn't possibly deny it. And even though she was a Virgo, and Virgos do have a doubting mind, and her mind doubted everything in the universe, it was very secondary for her having a doubting mind. It wasn't where she was coming from. She had a knowing heart. And sometimes Virgos have a knowing heart, and she did. And so she knew, she just knew. She wrestled with herself a little, but she knew. Basically, she knew that she wasn't going to accomplish anything in this life, but she would accomplish everything after death. And that's unusual, but she knew that.
Did she ever say what she, did she ever go into more of like what she felt like she was going to accomplish?
The main thing was that she felt that if she could, there's one little piece I need to put in here. When she came to live with me in the Santa Cruz Mountains, I had just gotten involved with a group called Wellsprings, which was centered in the Santa Cruz Mountains with a woman named Kay Ortmans. And she ended up training with Kay and having a tremendously strong involvement. I don't know why I'm leaving this out. And in Kay's world, communicating with beings on the other side or whatever was really what it was all about. There's a lot more to it, but that was a big part of what so that became this. And so essentially, Sarah knew that she was meant to be communicating from the death side and bringing the truths of the world beyond. And that's actually what she's done. We put out 2 books about this, and we actually have much more material than that. And she writes profoundly. She just has a visionary nature.
The Book of Theana or Theana is what you're talking about, right? That,
Yes.
yes. And then is it the Christ? Is it the Christ letters? Letter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those 2 books are both based on what she said after death.
That's very cool. And you said that she would come through the left side of your body, correct?
Yes.
What'd that feel like? What does that feel like?
Well, the first 2 months after she died were very intense.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to take it then, because that's when it's so intense that, okay, I still do, but I really felt it then. I felt that I was always being transported into a space where everything was open and spacious and profound and internally sourced. And it was such that the main thing that Sarah actually did in life was she did these Wellsprings alignments, which are like a extensive massage to classical music. And so I did some of that too. And so after she died, in a few instances, I would do a massage for somebody in that mode, and this energy would come through from her. And I could, my fingers, especially in my left hand, knew how to channel her completely. And her touch was incredible. So I would touch with my left hand, and I could do things that I didn't even know how to do.
That's so cool. I think that's so cool. And it's different than the way that you're talking about it kind of being like one-sided, if you will, is different than some of the ways that I've read about it happening before. So I think that's a very interesting way that
Yes.
it manifests, or that she comes through. And that, do you think there's any reason for the left side specifically? Or is it
It's
just
the
kind of
feminine receptive side.
the what? I'm sorry.
The feminine receptive side.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, I have a question. This is kind of off. This is on topic, but it's off of this topic, I guess. Um, okay, so how you talk about like when we die, there are angels surrounding us. There are people that we've known surrounding us, right? That have passed on, or sometimes. Um, do you think that we ever leave some of ourselves on the other side to charge between lives?
What do you mean by charge?
Like that's how I think about it in my mind, you know, like okay, like we have this is probably gonna sound really stupid, but like we have like a battery, like think about ourselves as a battery, right, or something. And I don't know, for a certain incarnation we only need like 80% of our charge, so we leave 20% of it on the other side.
Well, okay.
Does that,
Some
does
of us,
that make sense?
some of us have previous selves of ours very much with us, not in a hindering way or a karmically limiting way, but in a way to help us and support us and keep us on course. And so we can draw upon them, we can bring them through, we can be with them and they can be with us. And for me, that's a big part of my life.
You want to talk a little bit about that if you want to? That's
Yes. Okay. So, for example, there was a lifetime where I was an artist, a kind of advanced artist, and that the artistry was such that it couldn't really stop at that point. I mean, he died. I mean, he did die the regular way. I mean, you know, as far as that goes, I don't mean it quite in a eerie sense, but he didn't stop. He he kind of kept with that vision, and it could allow him to influence people who were doing things connected with his life work ever since. And also, he is there with me because he is me and I am him. And it's so much. There's so many things that I should not have been able to do in this body that he helped with and others helped with, because this is my Virgo rising speaking. I'm just an ordinary guy in a certain way. I just, in some ways, I grew up in a regular world. I'm just as silly as everybody else is around here these days. You know, we're not exactly in the highest state. And I'm stunned by what's been able to happen in my life. But now I get it because I'm so united with my previous selves. See, to me, previous selves, or whatever you want to call them, are an absolutely interpenetrating part of the now. And for that matter, future selves are. Nothing is locked into time the way we think it is.
yeah, time isn't quite as linear as it's more cyclical. Yeah.
Yep.
Let me ask you something. You said he was an artist. What kind of artist?
Playwright.
Playwright. I was gonna say that I was gonna ask if it was drawing. I was thinking the way that you do your charts, if that could be a some kind of
Well, yeah. You know, in another life, I was a poet, and he's very involved with the way I do the stars. Um, his way of, because poetry for him was a kind of mystic experience. He wasn't a standard poet. Well, he did two kinds of poetry, but the main poetry that he connected with was very incredible, and it was a contemplative practice. And so, yeah, I mean, Actually, I have a lot of artists and people like that in my lineage, and I don't do art in any traditional way in this lifetime. I've never been an artist quite, but I'm all about that. It's just that it doesn't show up that, I mean, actually, this famous artist who was the playwright, it turns out that he tuned in also to sources. He didn't just, everybody always thinks that you're this genius, right? And you write things just out of your own individual whatever, and then that's it. Well, and I thought that about him for a while. It turns out not to be true. He was part of a communion circle, and they together wrote these things. And he put his name on it because you have to do that. There's something about all this, essentially, we're part of a community. We're part of an internal community. We're not just out here on our own.
No, we're not. No, we're definitely not. Even if we think we are, we're not.
Yep.
What would you recommend for somebody who feels like they can maybe tap into this kind of stuff, but maybe doesn't know how? Like to tap into, say, like previous selves, if you will, or even future selves.
Well, yeah. Half of it is just half, but half of it is to open yourself to dreams. A lot of things have happened for me in dreams. Um, to open to dreams, certain kinds of dreams, lucid dreams, whatever, and to not, if they come, don't immediately say, oh, that couldn't be true. I'm not Cleopatra. Well, there's so many Cleopatras that you're probably not Cleopatra, but it's um, there's a way in which the dream life and the inner life can guide you. Also, the other half, you have to train your mind to be free of words and concepts. That's actually how it's happened for me. That commune cult that I mentioned in the first session in 1969, our greatest spiritual practice for me was getting out of your head into a place where you don't have any words going on in your head. And I've worked with that ever since. And because of that, I'm open. You have to be really open because usually we're so busy on our own personal egoic mental track that we're not open. We're not weaving. We're not in tune with the greater ethers. It takes a lot of patience, endurance, and most of all, feeling for how spirit really works in our lives. Like we have to kind of grow up into it. When I started with all this stuff, I was not even very spiritual. I didn't really I wasn't interested. I always said I wasn't interested in this. I wasn't interested, and so it takes a certain series of experiences. You have to be open to that. You have to essentially, I decided that I wasn't going to say no to things. I wasn't, it's so easy to say no.
It is.
And, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to say, I mean, I started out saying no. I said no to everything, but I learned, my Jupiter and Scorpio used to love to say no. But I learned that it's not about that. It's about saying yes.
That makes sense. That makes sense. As far as dreams go, and kind of tap, because sometimes, you know, sometimes dreams feel like a random hodgepodge of things, and they, at least to me anyway, some of them feel like they're just random. Sometimes I've got dreams where, and this is actually really frequent, where I'll wake up feeling like the dream itself wasn't scary, but I'll wake up feeling like like my heart racing, like I've been chased or something. But the
Yes.
dream itself wasn't scary, so I don't really know why I wake up like that, but that's pretty common. And then just some weird reoccurring dreams. Let me ask you about that, reoccurring dreams. If you have a reoccurring dream, I'm assuming that that's probably something that should be taken note of, perhaps even from this kind of context.
Yeah. I would say for many people, reoccurring dreams are the closest thing to their inner story they're going to get, because we have a faulty memory and we don't really remember what happened, what I call the true past. We don't remember the true past, what happened, what the Akashic records would reveal about what happened. We remember the story we tell ourselves. But a dream, even though it has a story in it, is a little bit more on the source level. It's a little bit more independent of our ideas about things. So we could really get a lot of keys there. Things open up, things that we wouldn't be ready to see in our little ego self, because we're too identified and we're too crystallized in our ego identity.
So I guess even in saying that, even like the dreams that say I or anybody remembers that do feel just kind of random all over the place should probably also be.
Well, no, there are some dreams that just are random all over the place.
Okay. But the reoccurring ones, even if they take place in or they feel like they take place in this lifetime, it could be some kind of callback from before. Or what about even a call forward?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's essentially, we have a part of ourselves that knows a whole lot more than we give ourselves credit for. And if we can tap that in league with, let's say, friends and allies of who we really are, we can do things that ordinarily we don't think we can do.
That makes sense. I like that. Is there anything else that you would like to say on this subject before? Anywhere that this didn't kind of go that you wanted it to go?
Yeah, there's one more thing. So I am really concerned about people who are dying in a way where it's an escapist thing, where they just want to get out of here, and they don't. It's not a judgment call, but it can get to be pretty difficult. So I feel that people need to understand that death is not a way out of here. It's really a way through here. And that even if we need to die, we need to bless the earth in our dying. We must not curse the earth, curse the people that are here, curse this world, because we are so connected to this. We don't have a way out of here. We can't just dissociate. We really need to love and appreciate and honor this creation, because ultimately death and life are part of the same thing. And we're just going from one room to another.
Yeah, like just opening another door.
Yeah.
When you're talking about what you just said, are are you talking about something like suicide?
Yeah, and there's many ways to commit suicide.
Yeah. I was just making sure that I was on the same kind of. Okay. No, that makes sense though.
Yeah, we're obsessed with death these days, and part of it is that this world's very tough to be in, as we all know. And those of us who have been complaining about that for decades are really complaining about it now, because the 2020s are a lot to grapple with. And so it's so easy to lose heart and lose faith and lose trust. And for me, it's all about heart, faith, trust, and confidence.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
need a positive attitude.
Yeah. And that is, yeah, the 2020s have really been like, what the fuck? Like, what
Yeah.
the fuck? So it is kind of hard. It can be hard to keep yourself, you know what I mean, in that
Oh, yeah.
frame of mind that you're talking about, but it is so important to try to elevate yourself to that mindset, to that way of thinking, to that way of being. For sure.
Yes, because we are each other, and we create the field all the time.
You mean like we are all one kind of, we are all, yes.
Yes.
I believe that very much. Yes. We are all just extensions of the divine, if you will, and all one thing, not really separate. We think we're separate, probably because we have to learn something about some sort of polarity with being separate here.
Yes.
Kind of one of the points, probably. That's what, yeah. But we're not really separate. It's all like an illusion.
I have to say that you know a lot.
I do.
You do.
Well, that's good to know, because sometimes I feel like a dumbass. No, but seriously, thank you. That makes me feel good. Like maybe I know more than I think I do.
You do. You know more than you think you do.
It's funny. I had when I was in high school and I was about to graduate, the teacher went around the room and said something she liked. It was kind of strange. I don't know why she did this. And she mentioned something along those lines to me, like, you are smarter than you give yourself credit for, you know, something like that. And we're thinking, huh, all right. You know. Well, thank you. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and head off, because I think this is at like 40 something minutes.
Yeah, I haven't been looking at time, but yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
But I really enjoyed this. I really, really did. It's very cool to hear people talk about their experiences with this kind of thing, you know, and yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been good. I have never talked about it in this way before. I haven't been ready to. I mean, I've talked about it, but not in this way.
Well, I feel honored that you wanted to do this here. So thank you. That is yeah. And I will put where you can find, if you want to say where you can be found again, for
StarGenesisWisdom.com is the website. Phone number 808-785-6800. It's also on the website. Books, A Book of Theana, the Christ Letters, and all the astrology books. And yeah, I guess that's it.
okay. And I will put the links again below in the description box. And I will see all of y'all later on.
Bye-bye.